You always look at me that way when I bring this up, as if you're waiting for the moment I'll laugh, shake my head, and say it was all a joke, trauma, wartime confusion, or something like that. I understand. Truly. If I hadn't been there, maybe I'd look at you the same way. Maybe I'd also say that a man returns from a combat zone with his head broken from the inside and starts seeing monsters where there was only fear. But I was there, and that is exactly why I've never been able to sleep properly again. You want to know if I really believe in the supernatural? No. That word never suited me very well. Supernatural sounds like something from a movie, a legend, a story told to scare children. What I saw didn't look like an ancient curse, nor a ghost the way people imagine. It seemed worse. It seemed too real. It seemed like something living, conscious, intelligent, and completely wrong. I'm going to tell you once, from beginning to end, and you can believe it if you want. Just don't ask me, at the end, to pretend it was just stress, because it wasn't. This happened in 2009 in Ghazni Province, Afghanistan. At the time, I was 24 years old and a communications operator. I was the youngest in Echo Patrol, the youngest on the team, but not a complete novice. I had seen enough to know the difference between real fear and imagination running wild, and that's why what happened in that valley destroyed me. Because I knew exactly what a human threat was. I knew how to recognize an ambush, a false trail, hostile movement, a compromised radio, mechanical failure, psychological exhaustion. You learn that quickly, or you die early. That day, the order seemed too simple to hide the hell that came with it. A drone had picked up strange thermal signatures in a nameless valley. That was it. Irregular readings, signatures that appeared and disappeared without a defined pattern, sometimes resembling groups of people, sometimes spreading out as if they were heat stains crawling across the ground. There was no formal trail to the region, no known operational route, nor a clear strategic use for the location. On some old maps, that area appeared vaguely. On others, it was as if it didn't even exist. Command wanted visual confirmation. Get in. Confirm. Mark. Get out. Short mission. Reconnaissance. No direct confrontation expected. This kind of order almost always hides something, but usually it's just incomplete information. In that case, it was worse. It was total ignorance. Our sergeant was Michael Hayes, a firm, direct man, the kind who didn't need to repeat an order twice. Ramirez was the sniper, impulsive, nervous, but good at what he did. Mitchell was a guy who was overly attentive, very disciplined, always the first to notice when something didn't fit. Henderson held the rear, large, reliable, hard to shake. Dawson and Kerr were trackers. Fowler was the field medic, and I carried the radio, the frequencies, the adjustments, the weight of keeping the group connected to the rest of the world. The truth is, we knew each other very well. Too well. That's the kind of detail that seems small until you understand why it matters. In a patrol like that, you learn the way the others walk, breathe, curse, hesitate. You learn to read fatigue before it's spoken. You learn fear through silence. And whatever was in that valley noticed this faster than should have been possible. If you like dark military accounts, the kind that seem to have been torn from archives that should never have gone public, subscribe to the channel now. Because from here on, this story only gets worse. The walk started normally. That's the cruelest detail of all. There was no horror music playing in the background, no red sky, no cinematic feeling that death was waiting further ahead. It was a tense march like any other. Dry terrain, open sky, mountains casting long shadows, heavy equipment, weapons at the ready, minimal talk, distributed attention. But as we got closer to the valley, the environment began to change. And I'm not talking about a subjective feeling. I'm talking about a physical change, measurable. The wind stopped. It didn't weaken. It didn't change direction. It stopped all at once. It was a region where the air almost never stayed completely still, but there it did. And when the wind stopped, a cold came that didn't match the place. A damp, heavy cold that seemed to rise from the ground instead of descending from the air. That was when my radio started to hiss. First, a short burst of static, then another. I adjusted the frequency. I checked the connection. I inspected the device. The static decreased for a few seconds and then came back worse. The GPS also started to fail almost at the same time. The coordinates would freeze, spin, point in absurd directions. The route, which until then seemed simple, ceased to make sense before my eyes. If you still think all of this can be explained just by bad equipment, I thought the same thing at that moment. I swear I did. I wanted it to be that. I wanted it to be just interference, mountains, ore in the soil, any miserable, dull, technical explanation. Then we saw the mist. It wasn't a light layer of vapor. It wasn't dust. It wasn't smoke trapped between the rocks. It was too white, too low, too dense. It looked like spilled milk over the ground, spreading between rocks and depressions in the terrain in a slow, controlled way. It didn't match the weather, it didn't match the temperature, it didn't match anything. I was one of the first to feel it touching my leg, and I know how this sounds, but pay attention. It didn't feel like mist. It felt like matter. It had body. It had density. When it touched my shin, I felt resistance, as if that whiteness had its own weight, as if it didn't want to simply part with movement. Hayes ordered us to reduce speed and close the formation. No one argued. It was at that moment that the valley began to play with us. Ramirez heard his name first, called out in Hayes' exact voice, the same tone, the same authority, the same inflection. He turned on reflex, irritated because the voice had come from behind. Except Hayes was in front, in silence, looking toward us. The sergeant hadn't said a word. At the time, no one said much about it. Men like us don't like to put the impossible into words too early. We keep walking, as if the next step could restore logic. But a few minutes later, I heard a laugh. My own laugh, not similar. Not nearly the same, mine. Except I hadn't laughed. The entire patrol froze in that instant. Fowler looked around. Kerr raised his flashlight. Mitchell gripped his weapon. Hayes gave the order for no one to answer any voice, no one to leave the formation, no one to react. It was the first time I felt true fear, because until then, I was still trying to treat everything as a technical, environmental, or operational problem. Right then, I understood that something was listening, and not just listening, learning. If this atmosphere is already making you tense, leave a like on the video. This helps the channel a lot to continue bringing heavy stories like this one, the right way, with atmosphere and detail. Today, if I had to summarize it, I would say exactly what I thought afterward. The mist was testing us, testing which voices worked, which sounds made someone turn their head, which memories pulled a man out of his own discipline. We kept walking, maybe 10 meters, maybe 20. The notion of distance began to fail very early in there. Henderson was at the rear. You would have liked Henderson. He was the kind of guy who seemed indestructible. Big, firm, no drama. I remember his silhouette behind us perfectly, the weight of his steps, the position of his rifle. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. No scream, no shot, no struggle, no sound of running, no rolling stones, nothing. I turned around immediately. Kerr shone his light back. Ramirez cursed loudly. Fowler froze. There was no one. No new tracks, no drag marks, no blood, no sign of a fall. It was as if someone had erased Henderson from the scene with an invisible hand. In that instant, I understood something I still don't accept to this day. The mist had taken a man. and it had done so in absolute silence. After that, the mission was over. Not officially, not on the radio, not on paper, but inside our heads, it was over. What came from then on was just a desperate attempt to get out alive. The mist rose as we moved forward. First knees, then waist, then chest in the deeper parts of the terrain. The flashlights could only cut out small pieces of white in front of us. The rest of the world simply vanished. Mountain, horizon, depth, distance. Nothing made visual sense anymore. And then the voices got worse. They weren't just calling names. They were repeating conversations we'd had before entering the valley. Jokes, banal comments, exact snippets of speech in the exact timbre, with the right pauses, as if something had recorded our entire team and was now playing it all back to study how we reacted. Ramirez started to lose control. Mitchell still tried to keep a cool head. Fowler was shaking. Kerr's face was almost colorless. Dawson said the ground didn't make sense anymore, that marks would disappear and reappear, and I just wanted to keep walking. Continuing seemed the only way not to be swallowed by the idea that this thing was intelligent. Mitchell disappeared shortly after. It was fast. Too fast. A voice emerged on the left. Another responded on the right, as if two familiar people were speaking at the same time. Our gaze split for a second. A miserable second. When we looked again, Mitchell was gone. No scream, no plea for help, no struggle, no running shadow. Then real panic entered the group. Ramirez started to cry. Fowler tried to keep his hands steady and couldn't. Kerr kept repeating that he needed to get out of there. Dawson swore something was walking around us. Not a person, not an animal, something else. I saw just a piece of it, a piece, you understand. It wasn't even a complete vision. It was like a cutout of shadow moving fast within the mist itself. Too tall to be human, too wide to be an animal. No fixed outline, as if it depended on that white mass to exist. Years later, I still freeze before saying this out loud, but it's the most honest sentence I can say. The mist was the thing's body. And you? What would you do in this situation? Would you keep walking, even hearing perfect voices of people you know? Or would you have panicked already? Comment below which city or country you are watching from. And there was more. At a certain point, I realized it seemed to be breathing with us. When someone hyperventilated, the white in front of us surged forward more. When everyone tried to hold their breath for a moment, the mist also seemed to restrain its movement, as if it were synchronizing, as if it were entering our rhythm, as if it were wearing us from the inside out. Hayes still tried to maintain some command. That's why I managed to get out, I think, because until the end, he continued being a sergeant. At one point, he gripped my shoulder with such force that I was bruised afterward, and he said, "If I disappear, you keep going. Do not answer any voice." At the time, I wanted to reply that no one was going to disappear, that we were going to get out together, that there was still time to reorganize. But I didn't speak, perhaps because deep down, I already knew he was saying goodbye. We continued moving forward, a few more meters maybe. The valley had already devoured time, direction, and logic. The voices were mixing the dead and the living now. People from the team, people from my family, people I hadn't heard from in years. I heard my mother using a childhood nickname that no one there knew. I heard an old friend laughing near my ear. I heard my own voice asking for help in a way that almost made me spin my whole body around. Then, Hayes's hand left my shoulder. I turned instantly. He was gone. No sound, no struggle, no chance at all. The most solid man on the team simply ceased to exist by my side, and that was when Ramirez broke for good. He heard the voice of his dead sister. Perfect, not similar, perfect, in that way that only someone who has lost someone truly understands. He screamed, "Wait!" and ran before any of us could grab him. I still saw his flashlight cutting through the mist for 2 seconds. Then, it vanished. Dawson disappeared shortly after. Kerr fell to his knees, vomited, and stood up staggering. Fowler began to pray quietly, but it wasn't a whole prayer anymore. It was a bunch of broken words coming out of the mouth of someone who had lost the certainty of everything. The patrol no longer existed as a patrol. It was just what remained of fear trying to walk. Then it spoke to me, not using Hayes' voice, not Ramirez's, not mine, nor anyone I knew. It was a deep, distorted voice, too low to seem human. It didn't come from the front, nor the back, nor the side. It seemed to pass through my body before reaching my ear, and it said, "You shouldn't be here." I will never forget what I felt in that instant. Until then, I was afraid of dying. After that sentence, I was afraid of being noticed, truly. Because that thing wasn't just imitating. That thing was speaking on its own. It knew we were intruders. It knew there was a border. It knew that place was not for us. I took one more step, and I stepped out of the valley. Just like that. No transition, no border, no logic. One step still inside it, another already in the clean air. I fell to the ground, breathless, coughing, trying to understand why the sky was clear again. The mist had disappeared, not dissipating, not retreating. Gone. Behind me, there seemed to be only rock, silence, and a valley as empty as any other. That was when the radio turned on by itself, not with clean communication, not with an evacuation request. It turned on spitting static and fragments of voices that I recognized immediately. Hayes, Ramirez, Henderson, as if they were still speaking from very far away. I tried to respond, but I couldn't. I stayed on the ground looking at the entrance of the valley, waiting for someone to come out. No one came out. The searches began quickly. Helicopters, ground teams, thermal drones, repeated protocols. Nothing. They found no bodies. They found no coherent signs of combat. They found no trace proportional to the disappearance of 7 armed men. It was as if the valley had fed and then licked the plate clean. Do you believe there are military operations that never reach the public the way they actually happened? Right here in the comments, live archive. I want to see how many people also feel that some truths are hidden because they are just too impossible. But the worst came later. My interrogation wasn't done by my normal command. They weren't officers I knew. They weren't familiar faces. They weren't men who introduced themselves properly. They came without clear identification, spoke little, and listened too much. They confiscated my radio. They took my backpack. They erased the original report. They replaced everything with a fake document. They told me to sign non-disclosure agreements without an official letterhead. They took my weapon. They demanded neurological exams that never went through the protocol I was familiar with. And you know what scares me the most to this day? No one said I was crazy. No one tried to convince me that I was delirious. No one used the word trauma to invalidate what I was saying. They just listened, took notes, exchanged looks, and paid too much attention when I talked about the voices and, especially, about the radio. That means one thing that took me years to accept. They already knew something. Soldiers from the search teams were transferred a few days later. The names of Echo Patrol were buried in cold, vague, overly clean papers. Hayes, Mitchell, Henderson, Ramirez, all declared dead in an incident without details, without truth, without explanation. Today, that valley practically no longer exists on military maps. No drone flies over those coordinates. No troops step there, and I haven't gone back. Never again. But don't think it ended when I left. Because sometimes, inside my house, I hear my own voice. Not a thought, not a memory, not half-awake imagination. My voice, speaking in the other room, laughing quietly in the hallway, sometimes calling my name in a way I don't use when I'm awake. So, when you ask me if I believe in the supernatural, this is the answer. I don't know if that's the right word, but I know there are things in the world that are not human. Things that listen, learn, imitate, and keep parts of us. I survived, yes. At least that's what the paper says. But I know that, in a way, a part of me is still in that valley, echoing in the mist. Now I ask you, what would you do if you were in my place? If you heard your own voice calling your name from within a mist that shouldn't exist? Would you answer? Or would you run into the nothingness, like Ramirez? And more importantly, do you believe the government has the right to erase the existence of these men to hide what it cannot control? Or were these faceless men just trying to prevent panic from spreading? Don't let this truth be buried by the official cover-up. So that Echo Patrol is not forgotten, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Join the family and help keep these archives alive. I want to know, from which city are you listening to this account today? Leave your comment below. I read every single one of you. Thank you for listening until the end. The world is much darker than most people care to see.